Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. I might just give it a couple more seconds to wait until we've got a few more participants joining. There's a few of you still coming through, so I'll give it a few more minutes. Okay. Okay, let's get going. Okay, so today's webinar, we'll be looking at reports. So doing a bit more of an in-depth view into our reports. So just some housekeeping before we do get started. Today's webinar is going to be recorded. You will receive a copy after today. All of you are in listening mode only. So if you do have a question, use the chat or the Q&A. I might actually get you all to test the chat. I know we have some problems with it sometimes. Just make sure it's all turned on. Where is my chat box? Not working. Hang on one second. I'm just going to turn the chat on. There we go. Thanks, Naomi. Thank you. Excellent. That seems to be working well. Okay, so you can use the chat. I will be answering questions throughout today's webinar, but at the end, we will have time for questions as well if we didn't get to your question or if I didn't get to your question throughout. So I will introduce you all to who we have joining us today. So Neil, he's one of our training specialists, so he'll be taking you through today's demonstration. You've got myself and also Linda. So she'll be looking at Satora. Okay, so just a few things of what we'll cover in today's webinar. So we'll look at our most commonly run reports. We'll have a look at our appointment book reports, Satora, which is a practice analytics product. As I said, Linda will cover that. And our business intelligence module, which is a group of reports. So we'll go through some of that as well. So I will now hand you over to Neil, who will go through today's demonstration with you all. Thanks, Neil.
Thank you. So some of the reports I'm going to go through today is the most commonly run reports, which can be done at either the end of day or end of month or any period you select. The first report I'm going to talk about is probably the most commonly run report. So we go into location management and we come to the reports tab. The accounting, invoices and receipts over a period report is probably the most common run report. This can be done on a daily basis, or it can be done monthly, where you can look at the production for providers for the month. So when we run this, we can select the period. So I'm going to select month to date, and this can be done by provider or all providers. So you can break it down into individual providers if you want to print it one by one. You do have some options to be able to show inactive providers as well. If a provider has left the practice and was made inactive during this period, we'll click on that to have their details shown. We also have show totals only, which I'll show you in a moment. So when I click OK, I will get this report. First of all, it'll be broken up per provider, and at the very end is a grand total. These two figures here are likely to never match, purely because an invoice may have been raised in the period, but not a receipt, or vice versa. So in this instance, we can see the receipts are higher, which means an invoice was created in the period before this, but was received in this period. If we tick Show Totals Only, this will then show the grand totals without individual invoices. So it really depends if you want to see the invoices, the breakdown of each patient and their invoice, or if you want to see a grand total. The next report is the Total Receipts report. This is normally done to balance your Dental4Windows with your high-cap settlements. We have two options, Total Receipts or Total Receipts with Providers. Total Receipts is a consolidated report, which is all providers combined into one report. Or we can use the Total Receipts with Providers, where you can select providers individual, or it does break it up into providers when you run the report. Again, we can choose the period, and if we click OK, you'll see we have a list of all the different receipts raised for this provider. And at the bottom, we have a grand total and the payment methods. So these figures here should match what your settlement says. If we were to do Show Totals Only, like the previous report, this will then show you the individual or the payments without all the individual receipts. The next report is Unprinted Invoices. This report is basically any item in the treatment tab that has not been invoiced. So when we run this report, this is a snapshot of all items. So you'll see here, we have these items here that have not been invoiced. If you want to see more details of these, we can go into Debtors and Marketing and Batch Invoices. And if I change this to all dates, these are all patients who have items in treatment that have not been invoiced. So from here, you can go to the patient's record and you can have a look at it. The next report is Unallocated Deposits. So this is a report of all patients who have a green deposit in their account, which has not been used on an invoice as yet. So again, we can choose the period. So let's say quarter to date. And you can see this patient has an outstanding deposit. So therefore, they have $150 that can be used on a future invoice. And the last report I'm going to talk about today in these ones is the items performed over a period. So again, here we can select a date range, and we can do this by provider. So this will now show you how many times an item has been performed. Okay. So now I'm going to talk about some appointment book reports. Now, again, there's a lot more appointment book reports than what we're going to go through today. We go to the appointment book. The first one I'm going to talk about is the status report. That can be used for quite a few different reasons. The example I'm going to use today is patients who have an appointment next week and require lab work. So what you would do, you would have an appointment marked with the lab work needed, so L. So when we run this report, we go status report, we can choose next week, highlight the books we want to report on, and we choose lab work needed. So this is going to return any appointment that has that L status in the next week for these books. And here you can see we have these, so you can now follow up on the lab work for those patients. The next one I'm going to talk about is the appointment class report. So as some of you may be aware, you can actually color code your appointments. And you can actually do reports on that. So when you make the appointment, we have the class. And you can add your own classes in here. So what we can do, we can go to Reports drop-down and we come to Appointment Class Report. So again, we choose our date range, our books, and here we select our class. And I click OK. We have a report of all appointments assigned to that class. Okay, so sorry, Julie, you want me to repeat the last step? Was that for the class or the status? Okay, no problem. So with the status, when you create an appointment, so let's create an appointment, we can assign a status down here. And some of the statuses depending on what the appointment is. So if you choose the L status, you're basically assigning it so that you know lab work is required for this patient. So you'd normally use this if you have a lab job in production, and you can then follow up to see if that lab job has been returned yet in readiness for the appointment. And so therefore the status report can be run on those appointments. So the next report that I will talk about is the planned production report. So this report will give you a rundown of the appointments. So if we come down to the planned production, and again, you can select the date range. This will show you a rundown of appointments, and if the appointment is linked to a treatment plan, will show you the fees expected from those appointments. So, sorry, Julie, you wanted to know about the status report? I can go through those again. So we go to reports and we come down to status report. And this is where we can select the date range, the books, and also the status. So again, I'm going to select here, next week, and you can say any book or you can say all books. And then we have a report of all appointments next week with the L status. Okay. So the next report that I will go through is the work time analysis book report. So again, we go to reports and we come down to work time analysis. Again, we can choose the date range, provider, and if I click OK, this will give you a rundown of your books for the day. Gives you a breakdown of planned, which is basically the book open and finish times. Unused, which is white space. Then you've got appointments. So what percentage of your book is made up by appointments? And active and huddle. Okay, so these are preset slots that have been added. The next one I'll talk about is appointment time. So when I go to reports, we come down to appointment time. This report relies on the arrived, checked in, checked out being completed. What this report tells you is a rundown of appointments and was the patient late? Was the dentist late? Did it go overtime? So all of these are based on that arrived, checked in, checked out feature. So there are a lot more reports, as I said, that we have, and you can find those on our eSupport. If you click on Help, you can come down to eSupport. That will open eSupport, which is very beneficial, and this is available to you with your Dental4Windows. Ashley has asked, is there a way to look at appointment time based on appointment class? Unfortunately, there's not. The appointment time is based on preset slots and appointments. In eSupport, we can come down to bank slips and reporting, and in here we have commonly run reports. Okay. So that's basically a rundown of the main reports. So what I'll do, I will now pass over to Linda, who will talk about a bit about Satora.
Thank you, Neil. Just going to share my screen there. Thank you for that. So we just learned how lovely, nice reports are that you can have in Dental4Windows. So today I'm just come in and I'm just going to dangle a little bit of a carrot in front of you with our Satora is a new product that we have, and you might want to know what actually is Satora. So what is Satora? Satora is data analytics for dental businesses. So this is us grabbing data and then analyzing it for you. So how did this come about? We're a fusion that we have created using our expertise, as you know, Satora having the dental practice management program expertise. Then we have then joined up to get the innovation from a company called Cubico, and they're a leading provider of data analysts for the medical field. So they've been doing and getting analytic data for all their medical fields, and they're now working closely together with Satora so that we can now take data from your Dental4Windows and you can now analyze that data. How does Satora empower dental practices? So what with grabbing this data, I'm just going to give you a few highlights, not all of them that we can do here, but it can help you make informed decisions and grow your business, and to grow your business, meaning that looking at where the data is there areas that we can improve on, that we can make it grow? Is it going to tell us that we need to maybe put on another dental chair or something like that because we're overbooked or whatever the case may be? So it's going to give you the information that you can start analyzing. The other way it can do is optimize the practice operations and effectively allocate the resources. So this way then it can look at what data is coming out, and you look at it and say, oh, we need to put more resources in this particular area. And a lot of times we will usually go by our gut and say, oh, we really need to put a lot more resources into, say, new patients, when in fact we might be having to probably put new resources in retaining the existing patients. And it's not until you look at the data that you'll actually see how an impact this would have. So this would help you make those decisions. Strategically, you can set and achieve goals. So the beauty of this is that we can get you to get together as your team, and you can set goals that you can start to aim for. So you might have a monthly goal of what revenue we should be reaching for this particular month, and you can set that goal that you need to reach. So you can visually see it, and you can actually see it, and then you can reward yourselves when you reach that particular goal, or you might find that you might change the goal because it may became too easy. It also will uncover untapped opportunities. So what we're looking at here is probably find out areas that you maybe didn't realize. Maybe you could be getting revenue from. So there might be some areas that we need to follow up. And this will give you that data that will show you and give you that more revenue, hence that growth of the business that we've been talking about. And also, too, we like to see this as, get the team involved. It's always really important when the team's involved in the practice because that all helps with our practice growth as well. And that's foster a culture of continuous improvement. By having this data that we can analyze on a regular basis, we'll then see how we can improve in different areas within the business. And so we're constantly looking at getting out the best practice that we can for that business and achieving the best goal that we can have to give you there. So this can all be done through this program that we have. Now, if this seems pretty exciting to you and think, oh, this might be something we might need, well, if you want to know more, I've now there's a code. You can scan that code, or you can call the 1300 and 855 966, and you can organize a demo, and we could go through and give you some highlights to see whether this is something that you would like to endeavor in your practice, just to go that one step further in that data that we have and just analyzing it a little bit further. And on that note, I will now hand the baton back over to Neil, and he'll take over.
All right, thank you. So what I'm going to talk about next, briefly, is our report section called Business Intelligence Module. So what I'd like to see, if you can tell me in the chat, if you know of or use Business Intelligence Module reports. Okay, looks like a lot of people don't know or don't use it. So it is an extra module, but what you'll see is in the reports, we have a group called Business Intelligence Module. You'll know you've purchased it if you have reports in here. If this is blank, it means you don't have it. I'm just going to give a quick brief overview of it. Our next webinar on the 25th of June is we're going to run a more in-depth webinar on these reports and where they collect data from. So these are metrics where you can get an idea of the general position of your practice. It covers things like average appointment time, which looks at the difference between arrived and checked in for patients. So you can see on average how long patients are waiting in the waiting room. You've also got average treatment time, which is checked in to checked out. You can also do a comparison between insurance funds or insurance funds or fee levels. So you can compare and you can see how much you're doing for Bupa in HCF, for example. And you can use that data to maybe try and do a campaign to try and get more patients with HCF, for example. And you have a whole lot of other KPI reports where you can actually do things like production per hour, per workday, and you can do a lot more like that. You can also do the huddle checklist, which is a really good one. That report helps you to determine your day. So if I run the huddle checklist, again, we can select the books that we're looking at, and I click OK. That will give me a breakdown of appointments today. And if the appointment is linked to a treatment plan, that'll show you treatment that's being done for that appointment. So you can compare and you can say, okay, we're going to prepare for this appointment because we know what we're doing in that appointment. You have alerts, which is any alert set up for the patient. And these 4 columns is for you to print it out and to fill these columns in manually on the page. So you can see that if you run this every day, this will help you to prepare your morning huddle. If you would be interested in having the business intelligence module, by all means, let us know and we can get in contact with you to discuss that. And as I mentioned, our next webinar, 25th of June, we're going to do a more in-depth into this and to reports and where it collects data from and how. So now I will hand back to Karina.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks, Linda. So at this point in time, guys, we will be taking your questions. So do we have any questions? We can, we'll answer them live and try and give you a demonstration at the same time. Just going in, so you can, like I said, use the chat or the Q&A if there are any questions. I've got one question that's come through for Shannon. Would it be what would be the best report to figure out our provider's monthly income?
Okay, so Shannon, so commission can be calculated on a couple of different ways, whether you're doing it on invoices raised or payments received. So we go into our standard reports. If we've got ones here, commission details on invoices raised or commission details on receipts. For this to work, what we do is we go into the provider's record and we make sure we have a commission set up here. And if you want to have expenses taken off, we would run cost for expenses and we would set up there, which will deduct from there. So it really comes down to how you pay your providers. Okay. So Kiri has asked what report would be best to run for active patients. So we do have an active patients report here. So what we do is we select the date range of when they were active. So when did they visit? If we select all, what this will do, if I click OK, this will give us a number of active patients, which is patients who have visited in this period. So on this report, if a patient has seen George, but has also seen Hardy, then they will appear in here and also in here. So this shows you active per provider. So Kiri has asked if that goes by last exam and clean or any treatment. It's any treatment. If, however, when we run this report and we choose show total only, this will give you a complete number of active patients for the practice, regardless of which one. Okay.
Rebecca's also asked, Neil, can you run a report on patients that have debts?
Have debts? You certainly can.
Yes.
So to do that, we go into debtors and marketing, and we come over to the debtors tab. What this will show you is all invoices that are outstanding. Okay. So these invoices have an outstanding balance. And this is where you get that data. So Jeet has asked how to run a batch report for hygiene recalls. That's done doing your recalls. What we're best to do, if you can let us know your practice number, and we will be in contact, and we will tell you, we can go through with you how to do that, because the recalls are quite different per practice.
Can we print a report on the discount given to patients, like which dentist is giving and how much?
Yes. So what you can do, we go into our reports, and we have what's called a discount categories report. So when you run this report, you can choose which provider, and you can also choose again the date range. And I've got no discounts in here. I'm just going to say year to date. This will give you a rundown of discounts that have been raised, and as I said, per provider. Okay. So Shannon's asked the most efficient way to get monthly billings for each provider based on the money received, not invoices raised. That would be your total receipts with providers report. Because this one looks at receipts, which is payments received, and then you would select the provider. And so now you are seeing the invoices or payments received for each provider and that provider only. And if I untick show totals only, it shows me a breakdown of those receipts and the patient and what the payment method was.
So Brittany has asked, what is the best report to create a KPI presentation for a practitioner to show them at the end of every month? This might be something we cover next month in the BIM, but
Yes,
yeah.
or Satora could possibly do that for you. Would that be something best in Satora, Linda?
Oh, you could do that in Satora, because you can do individual providers and look at individual stats and KPIs for providers in Satora. Yeah.
Thank you.
And you can set up individual dashboards that you can actually just see a particular provider and all their details on one dashboard if you needed to.
Brittany's asked how to generate the data for that report. In Satora, or do you mean with the reports? Okay.
So what I would say is, as I said, the next webinar we're doing in-depth into business intelligence module. That one, so if we go back into BIM, if we go into our KPI 0 run report here, okay, we can do what we call the gross production or net production. So gross production is all items entered into treatment, regardless of if it's been invoiced. Net production is all items who have been invoiced. Invoices, less receipts, less discounts, less refunds. And that one can be done per provider. So those two reports, Shannon's asking the difference between total receipts from providers and accounts invoices and receipts. They look at different data. The reason being is that the total invoices and receipts report will show you receipts that have been applied to an invoice, whereas the receipts report will show you receipts that have been raised. A typical thing there would be deposits. So if a patient comes in and pays $100 towards future treatment and there's no invoice, it'll be cast as a deposit. So because they're paying that money today, they'll be counted in the total receipts because you've received the money. Whereas on the invoices report, total invoice and receipts, it won't show there when that was run because it hasn't been applied to an invoice. And what you can also do is speak to our support department, and they can have a look and see if there's anything causing major discrepancies. And they can help you with that.
Shannon's also asked a question in the Q&A. So when taking a deposit, should we have it allocated to a selected provider?
So yes. So when you create a receipt and there's no invoice, that will create it as a deposit. Down here is where you select which provider is actually holding that deposit. So this is taken from the patient's main provider. When you're doing the treatment, if it's a different provider, what will happen is it'll be taken from this provider and put into the other provider's report. So that's where you would do that. If you have one provider, then obviously it doesn't matter. That's just recording on which provider is holding the deposit.
Fantastic. I think we've covered everyone's questions. If we haven't covered your, I think we have. I think I'm just going through the chats now. Do we have any other questions? We've gone quiet, which is good. I think we've answered everything. The recording of this webinar, yes. So today's webinar is recorded. You will receive a link after in an email. Thanks for today. Thank you. Okay, so just a few resources before we end things. We've got our eSupport, which Neil did show you briefly earlier. So for those of you who are asking about the KPI reports and the BIM, if you don't have it, there is a section in our eSupport which will go through with you all of those reports. But as we said, we're going to be covering that in depth in our next webinar next month. Now you can actually scan that QR code there and that'll take you straight to eSupport. But you can access eSupport from your Dental4Windows. If you go to the help menu and then click on eSupport, it'll open up the link for there as well. Feel free to email us if you need to. Our email is on screen. And you've got our website here as well. So our website, if you go to the website, will show you there's a blogs page, and the blogs page holds all of our past webinars that we've done, so you can rewatch them there as well as receiving the link to this recording. You can watch past ones if you didn't join us then either. Okay, so this concludes today's webinar.
I'll just
Thank
answer
you.
a question
Oh, yep.
from Sharon,
Yep.
who has asked
Sure.
how I get the total hours worked for a dentist. So
Yeah, go
if
for it.
I share my screen again, in the Business Intelligence module under the KPI 01 report, we do have clinical hours. And this will give you the number of clinical hours per provider per month. There are a couple of things you need to make sure that are set up correctly for that to be accurate. And that is what we call work time. So in the appointment, when you create a break, for example, you need to tell it if this is work time or not. So is this break a productive break or is it non-productive, like lunch or having to leave for the day or the afternoon? The other one is our preset slots. If we go to options and we come down to set up pre-book slots, this is where you can preset slots during the day, like lunch, etc. Again, you have work time, which needs to be set up correctly for that report. Appointments are automatically counted as white space, as work time, as is white space. So that's the report you would run to see the number of hours they've worked. The other option that you have is we have staff clock in, staff clock off. So when a staff member clocks on, this will record that they've clocked on for the day and they also clock off. We have customers use this for payroll, for example. So what you can do is go to your reports, and we have a report called staff attendance times. And that report will show you how many hours a staff member has worked for the day. So they're the two different reports you could run. So I hope that's answered your question.
Okay.
All right.
With that said, thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope you have learnt something and enjoyed today's presentation, and we hope to see you all or some of you next month. Thank you and have a good afternoon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Thanks, Neil.
Thank you.